Madame la Directrice.
Madam Director General, Mr. Vice President of the Shoah Memorial, Madam Vice Chair of the German Bundestag, Mr. Chief Rabbi, Mr. the President of the World Congress of Mountain Jews, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors and permanent delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On the 27th of January 1945, the Soviet troops reached the Nazi camp, the concentration and extermination camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau. In 2005, the General Assembly of the United Nations decided that each year, around this date, the international community would honor the memory of the victims of the Holocaust. So tonight we are together at UNESCO for the 13th consecutive year to pay homage to these victims, their relatives, and the survivors. 1945-2020, 75 years have passed. 3 generations have passed. The testimonies of the survivors, and we will be listening to one later on, are becoming rarer and rarer. This duty of memory must never die down, because Shoah was not just a tragic moment in history. It was an unprecedented crime. It was the negation of our humanity. It's a very deep wound that we all carry within us, whatever our origins. This day of commemoration is not just the day of remembrance, it's the day of living memory. It calls on our responsibility, it calls on our vigilance. Mass crimes continue to be committed in several regions in the world. We have increased anti-Semitism, hate speech continue to spread. They poison up the social media. After 75 years, when the voices of Shoah survivors gradually die down, information and education remain essential. But this is not enough. Every day, everywhere, we have to continue defending human rights and promoting with the younger generation the spirit of resistance, understanding, and tolerance. We received a message from Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, and this is a video message, and I suggest that we listen to it now.
Thanks to everyone participating in this commemoration ceremony to mark the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, and I thank all those involved in organizing it. Today, we remember the 6 million Jewish men, women and children, and millions of others who died in the Holocaust, victims of the Nazis and their collaborators. We pledge that we will never forget. We vow to tell their stories and honor them by defending everyone's right to live with dignity in a just and peaceful world. 75 years ago, the liberation of the death camps ended the carnage but horrified the world as the full scope of the Nazis' crimes became clear. Out of these horrors, the United Nations was created to bring countries together for peace and our common humanity and to prevent any repetition of such crimes against humanity. The resurgence of hatred in recent years, from violent extremism to attacks on places of worship, shows that anti-Semitism and other forms of religious bigotry, racism and prejudice are still very much with us. But just as hatred persists, so must our resolve to fight it. Today and every day, we commemorate the victims of the Holocaust by pursuing truth, remembrance and education, and by building peace and justice around the world.
À l'UNESCO, les efforts pour la transmission.
At UNESCO, the efforts made to transmit this memory are long-term efforts, way beyond such a day as this one. And I would like, without further ado, to ask Ms. Audrey Azoulay, Director General of UNESCO, to come together with François Heilbronn, who is the Vice President of the Shoah Memorial, who is a partner to UNESCO in this day.
Monsieur le Président du Conseil exécutif.
Chairperson of the Executive Board of UNESCO, Madam President of the Bundestag, Vice President of the Shoah Memorial, dear François Heilbronn, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, permanent delegates, participating in this day is very special, of course, dear friends, welcome. Tonight we find ourselves here at UNESCO to commemorate a moment that was a shockwave that continues to weigh on the conscience of humanity, the day when the Soviet army entered the concentration camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau. And this is a shockwave which is still reverberating, because from that time the world entered into these camps and saw what was inconceivable to see, what we did not want to see. In Auschwitz, close to 1 million men, women and children were killed simply because they were Jewish, very often as soon as they arrived. Many others, tens of thousands of Roma and Sinti, prisoners of war, political opponents, and other persons who were persecuted were interned and found their death. All in all, 1.1 million people were assassinated by the Nazis. And so the name of Auschwitz-Birkenau, like that of Belzec, Chełmno, Majdanek, Sobibór, and Treblinka, symbolizes forever after the barbarity of these camps. And these victims would be condemned a second time if we forgot them. And that is why we are meeting here to pay tribute to them on this day of memory before other ceremonies take place in Israel and Poland, at the head office of the United Nations in New York and elsewhere. And that is why the United Nations created this day, because, and this is worth saying over and over, the transmission of this memory is a collective responsibility that commits all of us, because the crime of genocide weighs on the conscience of humanity as a whole. to re-establish these victims through their names, their individuality. That is to say, what has disappeared, the entire world of European Jews. We must rediscover their drawings, their writings, their music, retrace their stories, and that way combat the effort to make them disappear, which is what the Nazis wanted. To give witness was never easy, and was even more so on the morrow of the Shoah. Today, we have the good fortune to hear out Nikita Tursky, himself an Auschwitz survivor and co-founder of the Museum of the History of Polish Jews in Warsaw. He's agreed to join us to take the floor tonight, and I would like to tell him how much we respect him and how grateful we are. To combat forgetfulness, to study and to make visible the mechanisms in place with obstination and patience, that is something that must be done. Combating this effort to forget, that is something that researchers do. We must welcome them and we must thank them for that effort. The work of researchers, of historians, must not be instrumentalized, it must not be undermined. It is our duty to support them in their research work, their freedom to do the research, and that is why one of the sessions of this afternoon's study day or conference concentrated specifically on the issue of research and academic freedom. UNESCO is very much committed to this through its network of university chairs dedicated to the prevention of genocide. A new one was just created in 2019 at the University of Baghdad, and another one is about to be set up at the University of Erevan. And we do this also through our program devoted to archives, which are regularly enriched with documentation related to the history of the Shoah. Auschwitz is one of those enormous disasters that must serve as a warning, wrote one of the great writers of the 20th century, Imre Kertész, subsequently a Nobel Prize winner. But for that we have to be attentive, and this attention means to name the scourge of racism and anti-Semitism. And for all those who want to deny the existence of the Shoah, to relativize the scope of it, or who want to absolve the assassins of their crimes and their accomplices, and we must firmly oppose that with facts and knowledge. And in this regard, I would like to thank the World Jewish Congress for having joined us in the launching just a year ago of our new site about Holocaust.org. And this site, which we wanted to have known with the hashtag #WeRemember campaign, works to combat denial online and incitement to hatred. Here in UNESCO, we also work to support the educational community, teachers who are often the first to be confronted with the complex and difficult problems of transmission of this history. And they have to sometimes combat competing sources which sow doubt. And so we do support a worldwide program for teaching the memory of the Shoah. We do this with various partners such as the OSCE, the USC Shoah Foundation. We offer specific resources, practical guides, but also work on the training of teachers.
Ladies and gentlemen, being attentive means helping to prevent the resurgence of genocide and mass violence. It also means fighting hate speech, because neither anti-Semitism nor racism are dead. They continue to claim lives. Minorities continue to be discriminated against and persecuted for their religion, origin, or culture. Civilian populations continue to be the victims of war, of crimes against humanity and genocide. It is our collective responsibility to state emphatically that today's hatred is just like yesterday. It can be resisted to. It is resistible, as Bertolt Brecht wrote. And this hatred can be of our place and of our time. We know now that technological modernity, knowledge, science, the arts, education cannot safeguard us against barbarity unless they are deeply and firmly rooted in respect for human dignity. This is the profound meaning behind the establishment of an organization like UNESCO. I would like to thank our partners and the member states, our partners as well, that are assuming their responsibilities through memory, educational, archival, and heritage policies. You can count on our support. Thus, for the first time last year, officials from education ministries of 60 countries from all regions of the world participated in a workshop on contemporary anti-Semitism. It's an effort that we will continue this year. I would like also to mention the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum, the Shoah Memorial, the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., Yad Vashem, of course, and all the educational and cultural institutions that are our faithful partners. And last but not least, I'd like to thank the World Jewish Congress, presided by Ron Lauder, another key partner with whom we have further strengthened our collaboration in the recent years. Nous allons entendre.
Ladies and gentlemen, shortly we will hear the Kaddish, and I thank the Grand Rabbi who will recite the Kaddish. For that, we will also hear the Male Jewish Choir of Moscow, thanks to the support of the Russian delegation and an organization, the World Jewish Congress of Mountain Jews. And I would like to thank them, and I welcome the President, Akiv Gilalov, as well as those who accompany him, including the Secretary General of the World Islamic League, Mr. Mohammed bin Abdul Karim Alisa. Now, literature, music, arts represent the singularity of every life, and that's a form of resistance. And so I would like to end with the very telling words of someone who managed to survive the camps, and who this really expresses, I think, the reality of the Shoah. And I'm thinking, of course, of Primo Levi. His words, I think, are a warning to all of us, and a warning especially to political decision makers in the world and their public discourse, because they must really be careful in what they say. And I end with these words of Primo Levi. Many people, many nations can find themselves holding more or less wittingly that every stranger is an enemy. For the most part, this conviction lies deep down like some latent infection. It betrays itself only in random, disconnected acts, and does not lie at the base of a system of reason. But when this does come about, when the unspoken dogma becomes the major premise in a syllogism, then, at the end of the chain, there is the lager. The story of the death camps should be understood by everyone as a sinister alarm signal. Thank you very much for your attention. Madam Director General of UNESCO, dear Audrey Azoulay, President of the Bundestag, Madame Roth, Mr. Kaufmann, Your Excellencies, and Grand Rabbi, survivors of the Shoah, ladies and gentlemen. 75 years ago on this very day, in the wee hours of 22 January 1945, the last torturers, the last executioners, the last guards left the camp of Auschwitz II, called Birkenau. On 17 and 18 January, they had already dragged with them across roads covered with snow at -20, more than 70,000 Jewish deportees who were weak, malnourished, who were wounded. They left behind, with no heating and no food, almost 7,000 ill persons who were too weak to leave the Soviets, who were just 100 kilometers away. The cannons were roaring. The writer Primo Levi, already quoted by the Director General, was one of those who remained in the camp. And he wrote on 17 January in If It Were a Man, at the time when the great machine of the lager closed down definitively, it was then that 10 days beyond space and time started for us. So it was 75 years ago on 22 January that the last SS fled. Auschwitz-Birkenau had no more guards. The Nazi torturers, fleeing like cowards, left behind them the greatest factory to kill ever designed and operated by man. 960,000 Jews, men, women, children, old persons from all of Europe, including close to 70,000 Jews who brought from France, including 12 members of my family who were assassinated in Auschwitz-Birkenau. 20,000 Roma and Sinti also found death by entire families. The 27th of January 1945, a date chosen for the commemoration of the International Day dedicated to the memory of the victims of the Holocaust. It was then that the Soviets discovered Birkenau. They discovered it, they did not liberate it. I lift my gaze to the clouds of Auschwitz-Birkenau, like I did on Sunday last when at the Shoah Memorial, together with Anne Hidalgo and some mayors, we commemorated the event. And I thought of the poem of Paul Celan, Fleeing in Death, written in 1945, and those words of his, "Your smoke will rise to the skies, you will have your tomb in the clouds." And these clouds of Auschwitz, in which more than 1 million of our Jewish brothers and sisters and Roma and Sinti repose for the last 75 years. It is in that million of tombs in the clouds that we find these individuals who have become bouquets of forgotten flowers. Think of the 6 million Jews assassinated in all of Europe by the Jews. Think of the 1.5 million Armenians assassinated by Turks. Think of the 200,000 Roman Sinti assassinated by the Nazis. Think of 1 million Tutsis assassinated by the Hutus. Genocides were the fate of that murderous century, of that 20th century. And what about the 21st century? It has not started well with crimes on an industrial scale, the massacre of Yazidis by radical Islamists, mass murders of Rohingyas in Burma, the internment in huge numbers of Uyghurs in the camps of China, unending massacres in the region of the Great Lakes and in Darfur, the massacre of civilians by chemical weapons in Syria, massacres of Kurds. But here, in this home of the United Nations devoted to the most noble of human activities, education, science, and culture, allow me to hope in truth, justice, and altruism through education, science, and culture. These are our essential missions at the Shoah Memorial. This is our unflagging commitment since we were created in the very middle of the Nazi winter in Grenoble in 1943. And you can see an exhibit about our organization as you leave the hall. To give witness, to teach, to train, to bring together, and to provide evidence of the crimes, that is our mission. On Sunday, 26 January, we will be inaugurating a new exhibit and a series of conferences devoted to witnessing to evidence from Jewish survivors of the camps, and that exhibit is called The Voice of the Witnesses. And in the name of all of us, I would like very affectionately to welcome our friends who are so courageous, the miraculous survivors of the death camps who are present with us and who are here to help us to combat the hatred of the other, of the Jew, the Armenian, the Tutsi, the Roma, the Sinti, the Yazidi, the Rohingya, the Uyghur, the Kurd, the Darfuri, and so many others. Alas. And this murderous anti-Semitic hatred is still with us, even here in France. Since 2003, 12 Jews have been assassinated by fanaticized, radicalized Islamists simply because they were Jewish. On 27 January next, on that symbolic day, the President of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron, will inaugurate the renovated and complete wall of names with the names of 75,568 Jews deported from France. In the luminous stone of Jerusalem, the first names, and birth dates of all those who went to dig their graves in the clouds are engraved. And this wall is 65 meters long and 3 meters high. And if we were to engrave on a single wall the names of the 6 million Jews assassinated in Europe, the wall would be more than 5 kilometers long, which means that it would cover the distance that in Paris separates UNESCO from the Shoah Memorial near the Paris City Hall. So it is through education, the teaching of history, that we can push back hatred, all forms of hatred. That is the mission of our Shoah Memorial, where every year We teach more than 100,000 pupils. We train more than 6,000 teachers in the understanding of the process of genocide, how to combat denial, conspiracy, and all forms of racist and anti-Semitic hatred. We are very pleased that the United Nations and UNESCO have committed themselves for the last 14 years to combating for truth, education, and justice. We are grateful to Madame Audrey, the Director General of UNESCO, for having launched programs to combat anti-Semitism, which has become virulent in too many countries, including France. That is also the mission of the Shoah Memorial. It is through teaching and through requiring truth, rejecting denial, that we will build for our children a world in which the face of man, quite simply, will also be our face. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Azoulay.
Thank you, Ms. Azoulay. Thank you, Mr. Heidbrun. You are now going to watch an extract from a film called Sonderkommando, Auschwitz-Birkenau. This was a movie made in 2007 by Emil Weiss, and he does us the great honor of being with us today. The Sonderkommandos were these special commandos in charge of operating the crematoria. The deported prisoners, ultimate witnesses of the final solution, were assassinated after only a few weeks. Only a few of them survived. And in the months that followed, and in the years that followed, manuscripts, mostly in Yiddish, were discovered, buried beneath the ashes. With this movie, Emil Weiss lets us hear these extinguished voices. This is an unbearable but absolutely essential testimony.
La vie du Sonder.
The life of a Sonderkommando lasts 4 months. At the end of the 4 months, one fine day, an SS company comes and takes all of the members of the Sonderkommando to a courtyard behind the crematorium, and then they simply machine gun them down. A half an hour later, a new Sonderkommando appears. They take the clothes off their dead comrades, and just an hour later, there's nothing but a heap of ashes behind them. The first work of each Sonderkommando is to incinerate its predecessor. The first day after we reached the crematorium, the Unterscharführer SS, whose name I forget, gave us a speech, and he told us that we were going to be doing unpleasant work, but that we had to get used to it, and that in just a few days it would not be at all difficult for us. And he spoke to us in Polish. At no time in the course of his speech did he say a single word about the fact that we would be engaged in burning human bodies. He ended his speech with the words, "Lausen Arbeit," go to work, and he tapped us on the head with his stick. I was assigned to crematorium number 4 in Birkenau with 6 other Jews and 2 Poles in July of 1943. At the time, there were already 4 crematoria in Birkenau, 1 and 2 with 15 ovens each for 5,000 bodies, and crematoria 3 and 4 with 6 ovens each to burn 3,000 human remains every day. In total, it was possible to incinerate about 8,000 bodies per day in these 4 crematoria. 2 teams worked in a shift, the first from 7 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, and the second from 5 in the afternoon till 7 in the morning. After having completed the visit of the SS, I went up to the barracks of the Sonderkommando. There I had to deal with a few wounds and burns. These people were frequently burned. The men of the Sonderkommando rarely had organic diseases because they had beds and clothes that were clean, their food was good, in fact it was excellent. And these were all young men selected for their good physical condition and their strength. On the other hand, I encountered a lot of neuropathologies. It was terrible for them to know that their old relatives, their entire people, their women, their children were dying here. They would take thousands of bodies every day from the gas chambers to the incineration chambers. This resulted in a lot of nervous pressure and often neurasthenia. On the occasion of my visits, there would always be someone who would take me aside and who would beg me to give him safe and reliable and rapid poison.
We are 75 years later, 75 years of efforts to build a peaceful and united Europe. And within these reconstruction efforts, Germany has fully assumed its responsibilities and played a major role. It is an immense honor today to have with us the Vice President of the German Bundestag. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mrs. Claudia Roth.
Mesdames et Messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, dear guests, let me start by saying thank you. Thank you to UNESCO. Thank you to Audrey Azoulay. Thank you to the Vice President. Thank you to Peter Royce. Thank you for having invited me to this commemoration ceremony in memory of the victims of the Shoah. Today, 75 years after the liberation of the concentration camp in Auschwitz-Birkenau. Here, in a place like Paris, and me, as a representative of the German parliament, who, contrary to what some of my compatriots think and say, never benefited from any supposed advantage of being born too late. Indeed, I was born after what is the darkest chapter in German history, in the history of the world. I feel very deep responsibility, namely that of not pushing back the past, namely the responsibility of not just simply wanting to close this chapter. Rather, I feel the responsibility of having to accept it as an integral part of my history and to act on this knowledge. This is what our sons and daughters must never forget, wrote Éric de Rothschild in his publication Pour Mémoire, which I keep in my office in Berlin, well in view of all of my guests. They will transmit this to their children, he says, who will transmit it to their children, to the end of generations, because we must never forget. We must never forget the history of what was the absolute evil. And this is exactly what you are doing today. This is what we want to do together today. keep the memory alive, both scientifically as well as politically. Abolish the interior distance vis-à-vis a topic which is important for all of us, whether we're young or less young, and allow the stories of all of those who were hunted, deported, and killed to be forever ours. Because when this happens, we will not forget the crime against humanity, which must never happen again. This total negation of humanity, of humanism, as it happened under the Nazi domination. This painful story, which now turns into a mission of which we're all a part, a mission to fight with determination against everything that made such atrocities possible. To fight unwaveringly against any form of anti-Semitism, against any form of racism, of discrimination, to fight against any attempt to revisit, reinterpret history which cannot be relativized. Ladies and gentlemen, the 27th of January is the International Day dedicated to the memory of the victims of the Holocaust. The 27th of January is therefore for me a day of mourning, a day of commemoration, a day of remembrance, but of a remembrance which is clearly turned to the present, to a common future. Remembrance which is not the expression of undue attachment to the past, but which is actually the very robust foundation of a progressive and trusting perspective, of a truly European perspective. Because this Europe, despite its many imperfections, despite the sometimes daunting number of challenges awaiting us, it is this Europe which allowed us, French people, Germans, Poles, Czechs, Belgians, Austrians, and all of the others, to turn from hostile enemies into peaceful neighbors, and to turn from peaceful neighbors to friends. And this friendship seems to me more important than ever in a time like today, when the words Jew or gypsy or homosexual have again become insults during recess at school. And when our parliaments now count MPs in Germany, in France, everywhere in Europe, in the whole of the world, who think that they have the right to determine who should be a member of their exclusive club of a supposedly homogeneous people, and who should not be allowed as a member. At a time where we are faced with politicians, and mainly men, who want one thing above all others, namely that we get used to their hate speech, to their constant attacks and systematic attacks against minorities, to their ideology where we do not all have the same value, to their attempts even to revisit or minimize the past. Allow me, therefore, to conclude in saying thank you once more. Thank you to all of those who have made this European friendship possible. Thank you to the survivors who've had the courage to tell their story and who've allowed us to remember and to commemorate in a day like today. Thank you, finally, to all of you to keep alive day after day these two words born exactly 75 years ago, 1,224 kilometers away in Auschwitz-Birkenau. Nie wieder. Never again. Nie wieder. Thank you.
Thank you. En cette journée de...
On this day of remembrance, making our voices heard is essential, but so is silence. Silence for contemplation and prayer, and therefore I would now like to give the floor to the Chief Rabbi Olivier Kaufmann for the Kaddish and El Maleh Rachamin, and during these prayers I will ask you to kindly stand up and not to applaud at the end. Thank you.
El Maleh Rachamim Shoyechen Vameromim Hametzim menuchonechono Tachas kanefei Shechino V'malos Hoy kedoshim hoteorim Hoy kedoshim hoteorim Kezoarak yamazirim Heteni shemos Acheinu v'achiosenu Anashim, Nashim, Yeladim, Ve'yonikim, Shenergo, Ve'shenishreto, Ve'shenichneko, Ve'shenigvero Chaim Ve'machanot Ashmado, Be'Auschwitz, Majdanek, Treblineko, ובשאר מחנות השמדה על ידי הנאצים הגרמנים האכזרים יימח שמם וזכרם. היי כולם, היי קדושים הטהורים, שנפלו על קידוש השם. בעבור שאנו מתפללים לזכרו ביד אזכרוס נשמוסום. Oim begon edon, oim begon edon temenochosom. לכן ברחמים יסתירם בססר כנפיו לעולמים. אוי ויצרור, אוי ויצרור, ביצרור החיים את נשמוסום. אדוני ונחלוסום, אוי וינוחו על משכבום בשלום. ונאמר אמן. יסגדל ויסקדש שמי רבו, בעולמו דברו חירוסה וימליך מלכוסה, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלו ובזמן קורי ואמרו אמן. יהא שמי רבו מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיו. יסברר וישתבר ויספהר וישרוימם ויסנסה ויסדר ויסלה ויסלל שמי דקודשו בריחו. לאלו מן כל ביחוסו ושירוסו, תושבחוסו ונחמוסו דאמירון בעולמו ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבו מן שמעיו, וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Nikita Tursky was born Moshe Turbovich in 1926 in what is now Lithuania. In 1940, Moshe, his parents Elias and Elena Rachel, and his younger brother Wolf were forced into the Lodz ghetto. Moshe was 14. In 1944, the Turbovich family was deported to the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp, whereas Moshe's father and his brother were murdered upon arrival. He was later transferred to the Buchenwald concentration camp and was liberated after surviving a death march from Buchenwald. Moshe returned to Lodz, where he was reunited to his mother. Please welcome Nikita Tursky.
Chers amis, my dear friends, first of all, my fellow survivors, those who gathered today. Dear friends, I have been invited as an Auschwitz survivor to share with you eyewitness testimony, and of course, I accepted it because this is my duty. So long I'm alive, so long we are still with you, this is our obligation, this is our duty. However, I do think that a single experience, my experience, of one human being, of one inmate, is not sufficient. Well, I think I should present you two testimonies. Not only mine, I will start with another testimony, a testimony of my very close friend. He passed away a short time ago. His name was Roman Priester. And you'll see this is maybe a different testimony that would be mine. You should know two ways of life, of going through, passing the camps by different personalities, individuals. He was more or less my age, 1 year younger. He was a well-known journalist. He was a head of journalist schools in Israel, in England, in Poland. He was a wonderful, very gifted foreign correspondent. And he wrote his biography, and the title which he gave to this book, to his memoirs, his memories, is very significant. The cap, or the price of a life. Please keep this title in your memory. I will take out from his report, personal report, only two excerpts. We don't have time enough. They would be very open, very sincere, very frank, even, one could say, cruel, very cruel against himself. Some people could call it even exhibitionist, maybe. I wouldn't dare to write this kind of memoirs. But he dared, and he considered it as his duty to say it, to publish it, to inform the public opinion. Therefore, I think it is also my duty, even, and I warn you, there will be some very drastic elements. The first one. He was imprisoned in Auschwitz, and then afterwards in one of the sub-camps, kind of sub-camps, concentration sub-camps. There were more than 40 subdued to Auschwitz. He arrived there with his father. After a short time, his father got a typhoid. A typhoid in a camp is a verdict of death. Nevertheless, he tried, and this is what he writes about it, he tried to visit his father every day, and here is a very sincere, a very frank confession. He comes to the so-called infirmary. It's euphemism, infirmary in a camp. Let's call it so. Schonung. He arrives to the cot of his father. The nurse, der Pfleger, permits him. And he wants to speak to his father. And then he asks, Father, how do you feel? What would you like? Maybe could I help you? Did you eat your bread? And he confesses that, in matter of fact, he doesn't have in mind his father. He has in mind the bread, because his father, being so weak, he couldn't eat, so he was hiding the day portion of the bread behind the pillow, so-called pillow, beneath the blanket. And he's confessing, I asked with the father, but I was sure maybe he will propose me, you want it, take it. I was so hungry. No, the father answered, nothing. And so day by day, he was visiting his father and still having in mind, what did he do with the bread? After 3 days, his father passed away. The nurse, the helper, told him, your father is not more alive. He ran away, he ran on to the cart, to the bank where was his father laying. And first of all, what is behind the pillow? Nothing. Somebody stole the bread. And then he says, I became furious. I became furious, not because my father passed away, because somebody stole the bread which was to be mine, and he stole it. This paragraph of his confessions ends with a sentence, from now, I started being one on my own, alone. The second fragment of his memoirs really is very drastic, but it is important that you know it. To those who are not aware with the rules of Auschwitz, with the rules of camps, in the camps was a hierarchy. If you were the simple, the ordinary prison, there was a capo, a foreman, a capo, a schrijver, an elder of the block, blockälteste, or they were inmates, like you. But being, well, let's say, designed as a capo, as a foreman, as an elder, he was the Lord of your life, and he executed it. If he wouldn't do it, probably the Germans would kick him out, would replace him by a cruel other person. Those are the rules. So, Roman Pfister, he is alone. He arrives into the barracks, and he was a Hungarian Jew, but also a criminalist. He was elder of the barracks, of the block, so-called. Roman Pfister, excuse me telling it, till his end of his life, he was, I guess so, I am not to evaluate it, to say about it, but I think he was a good-looking, handsome gentleman. When he was young, he probably was a very attractive boy. And the elder was a homosexual. So when Roman arrived into the block, he singled him out. Next day, he went to his bunk with bread, started feeding him with bread. Roman was happy to get bread, but this was the price of being raped. He was raped by the elder, by the block elder, homosexual. He didn't oppose. In his memoirs, he says, I was happy. It was very painful, but I was happy. For the first time, I had no more, for the moment, hunger. But homosexuals were not tolerated by the Germans. And the elder knew that if it is discovered, he would be executed. So what did he do? While leaving Roman Pfister's bunk, he stole his cap. Here, my dear friends, you have to know, in most of the camps, when you had a roll call was every day was a roll call. They counted, and you were so long counted till the number was in order. But they didn't want to count the heads. Human heads, what human? They were counting the caps. So if somebody would lose his cap, it was a verdict to be killed, to be shot down at the roll call. And the elder, while leaving the bunk of Roman Pfister, he stole his cap. Why? In order not to have a witness that he is a homosexual. When Roman Pfister discovered it, he understood what happened. He was totally scared. Everybody knew it, and everybody was sleeping, having his cap beneath the blanket. Luckily, he noticed that somebody was not so careful and left his cap next to the blanket. And Roman confesses, and I stole, knowing that this is a verdict of death to this another prisoner. Well, here I'll, if you permit me, I will only quote one fragment of his memoirs, and this would be almost the end of the quotation. Next morning, roll call at 5. A light snow was falling. I was, it means Roman, in the second row. Somewhere behind me was a man waiting to die. I had no idea what the man without the cap felt. I refused to think about it from his point of view. His existence didn't matter. Mine did. The officer and the capo walked down the lines, inspecting our uniforms, our posture, our ability to work. I counted the seconds as they counted the prisoners. I wanted it to be over. The capitalist man didn't beg for his life. We all knew the rules of the game, and they killed alike. There was no need for words. The shot rang out without warning. One bullet to the brain. They always shot you in the back of the skull. I didn't want to know who the man was. I was delighted to be alive. Now we understand where from is the title, The Cap or the Price of Life. In some place, Roman Priester writes, I was alone, I was in hell, I was among wolves. Among wolves, there's only one rule, the wolves' rule. So you have to step on dead bodies. You have to step on corpses if you want to survive. This is also why he had the need to share with us, with the word, what does it mean, a consequence of the Shoah, a consequence of being dehumanized. Now let me speak something about myself. I was thinking, what part of my experience should I share with you? My crossing of my 2 death marches, everyday work, about salvation. I decided to share with you an answer to a question which I am very often asked. How did you survive? I am very often asked. Miss Marianne, Mr. Tursky, my dear Moshe, how did you survive? Well, of course, there would be very many answers to it in different ways. Some people I know, those who are believers, they would say, due to God's help, destiny, I was saved. Okay. Some people say, there were some, I had a chance to be in a good commando. A good commando, it means where you could get a little bit more food. Okay. I was quite top down, people in the street, one of the people in the street, ordinary, very ordinary prisoner. How did I survive? And I'm absolutely sure that I know the answer. I'll tell you one episode. Because I don't have more time to speak, I am speaking too long, I'll try to compress it. When I arrived in Auschwitz, after having been tattooed, once I was pushed taken to hard work in the camp, and a couple, a criminalist, never mind, it could be also a good Jewish boy. This time he was not Jewish. He ordered something. He was a Berliner. He was speaking a Berliner slang. Well, you know, I was only 17. I started learning languages. I didn't understand. So he really knocked me down. I fell down. My glasses were broken. And believe me, somebody who is short-sighted, if he is in Auschwitz without glasses, he can't see. In 2-3 days, he will be beaten to death by a foreman, by a capo, by another, because he wouldn't see what he has to do. So to obtain glasses for me, it was absolutely necessity. How? If you need glasses, what do? You go to the optician. Can you dream about an optician in Auschwitz? So, but there were glasses in Auschwitz to obtain. Those of you who visited Auschwitz, you know, you have hundreds and thousands of glasses from the dead bodies. And who was sorting it? The unit which was called Canada. It is those who visited know. You can see it as a core exhibition, but besides you have real mountains of hills of glasses. So there was a possibility to get the glasses for me. But the people from Canada, good Jewish boys, they wouldn't give you. They would only sell you. They would only demand to pay for it. Is there any currency in Auschwitz? Yes. There were 3 categories of currency. Top currency was vodka. But vodka was available only in those units which used to deal with civil people. There were some units. Some exchange, okay, they got some, not me. So second category, lower category of currency, what was it? Cigarettes. Because cigarettes, people would change their bread for cigarettes. But it was also not available to us, to me. The third was the most common currency in Auschwitz was bread. And they demanded you bring me 3 portions of your bread, and you will get glasses. If I would have to give 3 portions of bread, it means I decide to die. And now I am to tell you something. This is very important. I arrived in Auschwitz from the, as you have heard, Liesmanstadt Lodge Ghetto, where I was in the underground organization, with 9, together we are 10, comrades from the Machteret, from the underground, from the clandestine movement. We were together all the time. And the group, the collective of my comrades decided, we have to buy the glasses for this gentleman. And one day we got the 10 portions of bread. It was not too much. It was the daily food. Altogether 700, 800, 1,000 calories a day, per day. So this was the basic food. And the collective, the group decided 3 portions we cut out to obtain glasses for me, and everybody got 1/3 of bread this day less. My time, I see, is coming over. So it is my fortune, yes, that I was not left alone like Hermann Pfister. It is my fortune that I was with people who help you. So if I can say how we survived, it would be a longer story, how we helped each other, not only with bread, with preserving our dignity. This was the most important. Every day, we were, even being tired, there was half an hour to speak, to repeat foreign words, once in French, once in Russian, once in German, to learn, to study, to preserve your human dignity, because this was the most important in order to survive and to keep your will to survive. Friends, I had only to say the testimony, but permit me also 2 additional comments, conclusions. 1, never leave somebody being alone, being totally frustrated. 2, even in hell, solidarity is able to help to survive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for these words and this exceptional testimony. At the beginning of the ceremony, you had the privilege to hear the magnificent choir, the Moscow Male Jewish Cappella. They are with us today thanks to the President of the World Congress of Mountain Jews. Please warmly welcome Mr. Akif Gilalov.
Madam Azoulay, you'll no doubt want to put on a headset because otherwise you won't understand me. But Your Excellency, Madame Azoulay, dear friends, today we're all united to commemorate the memory of the victims of the Holocaust. You know, we're all here as brothers on our planet, and our common future depends on us and on us remaining united. This year we're celebrating the 75th anniversary of the victory in World War II against Nazism, and it is here in France that the Nazi Act of Surrender was signed. So that was a victory common to all the nations of the world. And we must now all unite for peace in our common home, this planet. We believe that it is extremely important to join our efforts in real common action and in symbolic acts of unity. And as an example of this, my organization, the United Religions Organization, organized an event on January 20th at the former Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. For the first time in history, leaders of Muslim communities visited Auschwitz-Birkenau to commemorate the victims of the Holocaust together with representatives of other world religions, Catholics, Orthodox Christians, and Jews. And through this ceremony, the United Religions emphasized the ancestral and spiritual closeness that exists among the monotheistic religions of the world, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, that is crucial today. I'd like to say that I'm very grateful to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres. We met on January the 15th in New York when he supported our initiative and sent us a video message, as he did for today's meeting. I would also like to express the highest possible respect for our friends and partners who are present here today. They're in the hall, and I'm thanking the Secretary General of the Muslim World League. He will be going to Auschwitz-Birkenau tomorrow. There will be some 70 muftis in Auschwitz-Birkenau tomorrow, thanks to Dr. Mohammed Al-Isa. That is an extremely important event. And I would also like to thank Mr. Marat Kabayev, who's also with us. He's the president of the International Association of Islam Business. And I would like to thank you for your presence. And I'm pleased that you've had an opportunity to hear the singing of the Moscow Male Jewish Cappella. This choir is one that we provide support to because we want to preserve cultural traditions. We're convinced that people can be united through music. Music is able to inspire and to comfort and to heal the wounds of the soul. In a camp of extermination, you hear the victims groaning, but you also can hear beautiful voices, and they reverberate in our hearts and souls. Thank you.
Bientôt, au terme de cette cérémonie dédiée à la mémoire des musiques et en images que
we are fast approaching the end of today's event. We are going to welcome up on stage once again the Moscow Male Jewish Cappella. Thank you to Alexandra Tsaliuk. Thank you to UNESCO. Thank you to Alexander Velikovsky on piano. Thank you to Gia Beshitaishvili and Nikita Tursky. Thank you so very much. You will then see a short video once again on behalf of UNESCO. Thank you so very much for coming out this evening.
Shalom, shalom, shalom.
Good evening, dear ladies and gentlemen. It's a big privilege for us to be here tonight and to sing in this wonderful evening concert. The next piece is a part of the Jewish liturgy, Ten Shabbat V'Ten Shalom Ba'ir Yerushalayim. Our soloist, laureate of international competitions, Gia Beshitaishvili.
Ten Shabbat, Ten Shalom.
The most important part of the Jewish worship, Shir LaMaalot and Shema Israel. Our soloist, Cantor Uriel Granat. We conclude our short performance tonight by anthem of Congress of the Mountain Jews, Avinu Malkeinu. Soloist Uriel Granat, piano part Alexander Velikovsky, and the Moscow Male Jewish Cappella.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everyone, and I wish you a wonderful night.